G'day everyone, Dicko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. For the sixth part of this Motionbuilder Mocap series, we are going to talk about how to set up your cameras, how to animate them, and how to be able to switch them between each other so you can get really dynamic camera movements straight off the bat without any real effort required. Now again, these are really powerful tools within Motionbuilder. That being said, this will be the last Motionbuilder tutorial of this series, and there could be a lot more to talk about within Motionbuilder. That being said, a lot of the other stuff that we can do from now on can be either done inside of Maya or done inside of Blender. So we're going to talk about that in the next few videos. But I can say without a doubt, setting up your cameras within Motionbuilder is probably one of the most easiest, one of the most streamlined methods that I know of. So continuing on from the previous video, I have my animation all set up here. I've got the little dance going on, but now I want to make this thing actually look a little bit more interesting by adding some interesting cameras. So what I'm going to do is go to my Elements tab in my asset browser, and I'm going to select the camera and drag it into the viewport. Not sure what happened there, but I just got to switch back to my regular view and it should be all good. So just go to the view tab, go to perspective if this happens to you, and just choose produce a perspective for the time being. Now to make things easier as an animator, we're going to split the viewport into two different displays. So we're going to have one with the perspective and then one looking through the cameras that we are creating. So I'm going to use the right side for my camera view. I'm just going to select into that viewport first. You can see a little white line pop up in the middle of the line. And I'm going to switch that to the camera view. Now, right now we only have a single camera in the viewport, so I just have to select camera. Once we have more cameras, you'll see more options in that menu. So right now you can see that it's kind of hard to see what the hell we're looking at. So what we need to do is change the way we display our viewport. So inside the camera settings, in the camera settings tab, we're going to change some attributes to make it easier to look at through the camera. So I'm going to change my aspect ratio to 1920 by 1080, setting the resolution to pixels, or in this case, fixed resolution. Yeah, it's a good idea to go to choose your resolution type first. So in this case, fixed resolution, and then type in the pixel aspect ratio that you want. So 1920 by 1080 in my case. I'm also going to change the default field of view to around 50. I'm going to turn on the square safe area because that will actually show you where the edges of the camera are. And you'll see that we have this field of view as well. So you can go ahead and change that field of view to a wider or more telephoto style lens. I'm going to give it a value of around 50 for the time being. You can change it at any time if you want. And I'm also going to turn on set as default on the camera as well. So whenever we create a brand new camera, it will carry on adding these same attributes to those cameras. So that means you won't have to go into every single camera that you create and change the settings to suit the same settings that we have here. So the camera is comprised of two different things. It's comprised of the camera itself, and it's also comprised of this thing called the camera interest, which is what it's looking at. It's the focal point of the camera. So the camera always aims toward the camera interest. As you can see with this little green line, this dotted line that's targeting this little locator-like shape. So we can animate both of these things, and we can place these things in different areas as we see fit as well. Now, you may find it difficult to select these things inside the viewport, so what I suggest is going through the navigator and selecting them there. So you can see in the scene tab, or in the navigator, if you go to scene and open up that menu at the top there, you will see the option for the camera interest. Now, the camera that you create will tell you which camera interest object it is using. So in my case, it's using, at this time, camera interest 2. So that's because I made a few cameras by accident before I recorded and I deleted them. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete some extraneous crap. And I'm going to rename it to match my camera. So in this case, the camera is called camera. So I'm just going to call it camera interest without a number. In your case, you shouldn't have this problem if you have never had a camera in the scene before. And as you can see, I'm trying to line up my cameras to suit the composition that I want. So using the camera and the camera interest at the same time, I'm going to line up my shots so that I have a composition that I think is suitable for the action that I'm looking at. Now, the cool thing about all this, of course, is that it's completely customizable. It's not like you can fuck this up, really. And if you want to change it, you are happy to change it. You can change it anytime you like if you need to. So for instance, I will probably go ahead and change this later on in the video. One thing I noticed is that in my particular dance, I've put the camera on the wrong side of the body because the head's turned away from the camera. So I go ahead and swap that out if I want to. But this is really just the planning stage of building out these cameras anyway. So there's nothing wrong with being a little bit experimental. Now, we're not going to use the same camera for the entire shot. We're going to add in a second camera for a new camera for every shot that we create. So in this case, I want to create a camera looking at the male character now in the next shot. So I'm going to go to my view and switch my perspective view to camera 2 or camera 1 in this case. And you can see here that now I'm looking through the second camera that I've created, and I'm going to go ahead and line that camera up to a composition that is suitable for this particular character. Now again, the nice thing about this entire setup is that the camera and the character at this point in time haven't been baked down and nothing is fixed in its state. So I can always go ahead and tweak the timing of my animation. I can go ahead and tweak the timing within the story mode and move my takes around if I have to, or I can move the camera as I see fit. So it's completely flexible. Also note that the new camera that I added has the exact same settings or presets that I've given the first camera because I set it as a default. So it has the same resolution, it has the same aspect ratio, it has the same focal length. So I have a good base to start from to allow me to edit those cameras without having to go through every single fucking setting. So what I like to do for the most part with these sort of shots or these sorts of animations is go through my cameras, add the cameras that I need, figure out what compositions I like the most, and then we are going to link them all up at the end. Or I might get to a certain stage in the animation that I have enough cameras that I don't want to go further, and then I start to link them up using what is called the camera switcher. So we're going to talk about that in a second once I've set up all my cameras. So I'm onto my third camera now, looking through the camera and seeing, oh, okay, there's some issues that I've made with my composition so far is that the characters are looking in the other direction. So I'm going to go ahead and flip all of these cameras around. Not a big deal because there's no animation that we've added to the cameras. There's no major changes that I have to do to the animation itself. All I got to do is move the cameras. So it's a very early blocking stage at this time. And of course, something's about to happen in just a few seconds, and that is... Wait for it. Here it comes. And we crashed. So always make sure to back up your files. Always save your files as you see fit. I unfortunately did not save it, but I have gone ahead and fixed up all my cameras back to where I've wanted them. So not a big deal. So now we are going to link up these cameras so they switch at certain points of the animation where I want them to. And that's done by using the camera switcher. In the navigator, just double click on the camera switcher and you'll see this new interface where we have a list of our cameras. But what I can do now is switch over to the camera switcher view in my viewport so I won't have to go ahead and manually switch it around. So just go to camera switcher and you'll see right now by default it's the camera switcher. And now what I'm going to do is go to frame 1, select my first camera and then push key. And that adds the camera to its own little timeline. Now I want the camera to switch when the girl finishes her somersault. So just choose the frame where I want to switch to the next camera, in which case camera 1, and then I put a keyframe down for that. And you can see there in the timeline that now I have camera 1 or camera and then camera 1 switching at the exact point that I want it to switch without me having to manually go ahead and keyframe the cameras to line up. So it will literally just keyframe between the shots. It's a really simple, really quick way to get a blocking of your cameras without really having to animate anything. You're literally just switching between the cameras, thus the camera switcher object inside of Motionbuilder. Now I can always go ahead now and tweak my animations, retime things, and add more cameras as I see fit. but that is really just the gist of it. You can also remove keyframes. You can add keyframes within the camera switcher as well. You can use the same camera twice down the line if you want to as well. So if, in my case, I use camera 2 twice in my animation eventually, but they're at different times in the timeline. All I got to do is key it a second time somewhere else down the timeline, and it switches back. So it's a really flexible, really easy way to go ahead and animate with. And of course, with all things animation-wise, there's nothing that really is 100% done out of the bat. So there's always going to be some tweaking involved between the shots, your cameras, your animations, and making sure they all sort of work well together. And of course, you can do some sort of camera tricks as well. So for instance, you know, if the shots don't sort of blend together very well, the animation takes don't blend very well, just use your camera switcher to hide the blend. So basically, you do a cut before the blend starts, and then you can sort of fake the hookup. And that is exactly how a traditional video is edited as well. So if something isn't like quite working well together with certain kinds of shots, they just choose another shot to work with. And as you can see here, I'm going ahead and just switching out some camera timings a little bit. I'm using the camera switcher to retime some of the shots where the cuts are. And you can always delete keys, you can add keys as you see fit. You can retime it as you see fit, and you're good to go. There's not really that much involved in the camera switcher. Now, of course, you can use more than 3 cameras. You can use as many cameras as you want in your shot. So as you can see here, I'm going to add a fourth camera to my composition. And I'm just going to time that in, do what I want to do, and I'm good to go. Now, just as I mentioned before, it is also possible to animate the camera directly with keyframes. So I'm going to have the camera actually animate around the people just with some simple keyframes. So just make sure that when you are keyframing the camera that you have the camera selected and that you can see that the animation controls have the camera rotation translation enabled. And just using the key button inside the animation controls, you can see that I can add animation keyframes as I see fit. It's not very difficult to do. So you can see the keyframes in the timeline on the top bar there, and you can delete them, you can alter them, you can do whatever you need to do if you need to. Also be aware that you can also animate the camera interest locator itself as well. So if you want to have, say, a camera pan from the feet and then look up toward the head of a character, you can animate just the camera interest to do that as well. Up to you, of course. So yeah, I'm just going to blaze through the demo of me just going through the camera setup, because really there's not much else to it. It's just using the camera switcher to switch between cameras, adding new cameras when you see fit, keyframing those cameras inside the viewport with some animation if you think that needs it, and then just being mindful of what you think works best. So it's really about composition, it's really about readability and continuity, standard sort of compositional stuff, and this is only something that you can really get to do with practice. And the great thing about the camera switcher is that it lets you practice this stuff pretty damn quickly and pretty damn easily. Whereas if you were to try to do this with, I don't know, doing it in Maya where you have to sort of keyframe one point to another point, all that sort of crap, it takes time. In Blender, there is a semi-equivalent thing to this, where you can sort of switch cameras in the timeline, which is pretty cool. But even then, it's not nearly as intuitive as this setup. Okay, so once you're actually done with your camera setup and you're happy with the animation, you're happy with everything else you want to do, and you want to go into Maya to clean things up, you need to do a few things. So I'm just going to show you what happens if you just think, oh, yep, everything's ready to go. Let's just link this up to Maya, and it should work, right? It should work. But if I go ahead and try to send it as a new scene, you'll see we come across a couple issues. Okay, so if we go to Maya now, just click the Go to Maya button up in the right corner, you will see that there's nothing in the scene. The only thing we have is the camera interest out of all the things, because we probably have a keyframe on it. And that's it. That's all there is. Where's everything else? Well, the answer is pretty simple. We just need to bake down all the animation that we have inside of our Motionbuilder file. So it's always good to back it up at this point before you start baking things down. But basically, we need to set everything down to keyframes, because even our animations, they're being sourced from the hard drive, like our FBX files in the story mode. The keyframes aren't embedded into the file of this project itself. We need to actually bake it down to a new scene. Same thing with all the cameras. So the first thing we're going to do is plot down the camera switcher. So just right-click on the camera switcher, push plot to new camera, and then that will actually link, like basically create a brand new camera which contains all of the different cameras in one camera, all the animation, everything that we need to do in one camera. So if we now go to our viewport perspective and change it to camera 8, in this case, that's my most recent camera, that's the one it baked it down to, you'll see that the single camera now contains all the animation of the camera switcher. So the camera switcher has taken the animation from the camera switcher and then the animation from the individual cameras, and then it's plotted it down to a brand new camera that we can now export to Maya. Okay, so now we have to bake down the characters to a brand new take. And the way we do that is actually through the story mode. So if we go to the story mode and then highlight all of the takes that we've put together in story mode, we're going to right click on those takes, and then we're going to go up to plot whole scene to current take. And what that's going to do is take all the information from the tracks inside of story mode and then combine it down to a single set of animation that can be sent to Maya with keyframes. So just let that do its thing. It's processing all the animation for keyframes. There's about 1300 in this case, so it does take a little bit of time sometimes. You can set up the FPS to what you like. And what we're going to do now is test this out and see how we go. So I'm going to send to Maya as a brand new scene again. And you can see here that the female character is actually working. It's working really well, but the other characters aren't there. Now, there could be a few reasons for that. One is that I may not have baked down the male character properly, though I think I did. The other thing is that you probably need to select everything in the scene as well that you want to send to Maya at the same time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double check on both accounts, plot down the current takes to again, as we can. Let it do its thing, though I think it should be fine. It should have been fine the first time. And then just to double check on top of that, I'm going to go ahead and go to edit, select all. And then I'm going to send it to Maya as a new scene again. And with all those things selected, you will see that it will bring in not just the camera switcher animation, it will bring in all the characters, but it'll also bring up a backup of each camera that we've had in the scene as well. So you can see every camera that's in the scene there doing its thing. And the dance is working perfectly. All is one giant take, working great. And if we click on the camera that we baked down all the animation to, so in this case it's camera 9, you can see me select that little tiny green dot there. You can see all the keyframes in the timeline that represent all the movement that we added to the camera. And if we go to our viewport and go to panels, go to perspective and camera 9 in this case, even though the net labeling is a bit weird, and turn on the resolution gate, you will see that it will have inherited the entirety of that animation. So the camera animation's in there, the character animation's in there, And then we also have our backup cameras in those other parts in the outliner, so just in case you want to use those again in the future. But that's about it when it comes to getting to this stage of this production. Now you can go ahead and start to refine the animation as we did in the previous videos. We can export this out to another software if you wanted to, or you can go ahead and just render it out. So it's really up to you. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Thank you for watching. I will catch you later and have fun. Cheers.